What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 4 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here talking the defenses for Week 4 of CFL Fantasy today. 6 defenses available, only 3 games on the schedule as of right now. There's 2 I like, 2 I'm cautiously optimistic on, and 2 I'm staying away from. So kind of even across the board. Let's take a look at the ones I like first. The first one I really like is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They're the most expensive one this week, $4,700. But they're expensive for a reason, because they've been averaging 13.3 points through 3 games. Second best in the league, only behind Saskatchewan, which, they've... through 3 weeks, their floor has been 11 points. Their ceiling's been 16. You can't ask for much else from a defensive performance in CFL Fantasy. Most teams last season hovered around the average of about 8 or 9 points, the best teams in the league. So they're definitely performing above last season's average, and they've been putting up the points for you. They'll cost you a good amount more than some of the other options, but the Bombers have put up a couple of sacks, a couple of turnovers in each game. In the first couple games of the season, they held teams to very few points. That fell off in Week 3 a bit against Toronto, but I always like this defense for Winnipeg. You have one of the best pass rushes in the league in Willie Jefferson, Jackson Jeffcoat, causing nightmares for quarterbacks and offensive lines. And I think it could cause a nightmare for a rookie quarterback for Calgary in Jake Maier. I think Maier has the potential to throw a couple picks here. He threw 2 against Montreal before he settled in week number 3. The offensive line I don't think has been spectacular for Calgary so far this season. So I think there's some room to put up some decent points against the Stampeders offense. I think that pass rush is going to get through for a couple sacks, probably force a couple turnovers, and if they can get back to that level of play from the first 2 weeks, and if the offense can stay out on the field for Winnipeg and give a little more rest to the defense, because remember, in Week 3, they were out on the field for almost 3/4 of the game. They should be more well-rested and be able to make those plays and not have those breaks in coverage that we saw that led to some points for Toronto. So I'm really high on the Bombers' defense against Calgary in week number 4. I'm also really high on the Montreal defense. They come in at $3,200. They've been averaging 7 points so far through 2 games, 8 against Edmonton, 6 against Calgary in week number 3. So I think the reason I really like the Montreal defense, well, first, I do like their pass rush. I like Nick Usher. I like Antonio Simmons. I like Almondo Sewell. I think that's a very good pass rush they have there on defense. I also think they have some guys in the defensive backfield that can make some pretty good plays. And the main reason I like them so far is Hamilton's offense has just been struggling in the 2 games they've played. In week 1, the Bombers' defense put up 16 fantasy points. In week 2, Saskatchewan's defense put up 18. So the Ticats defenses have put up an average of 17 points against the Ticats so far. Their offensive line has been shaky through 2 games. They're missing Chris Van Zyl this week, most likely, who's their top offensive lineman, really the leader for that unit. You got Dane Evans, who's I think more of a pocket passer than Jeremiah Masoli is. He'll be starting for the Ticats. So, if Evans is staying in the pocket and you've got a shaky offensive line, you've got a strong pass rush from the Montreal defense, I could see a couple sacks coming this week. I could see a couple turnovers coming. And so for $3,200, I really like the Alouettes defense for week number 4. The 2 options I kind of like, I kind of don't, are the head-to-head matchup from Saturday, the BC Lions and the Ottawa Red Blacks. Both come in at $3,200. Ottawa's defense 2 games this year has averaged 9.5 fantasy points. BC 3 games has averaged 7.3. I actually like the BC defense a little bit more because that, much like Hamilton, Ottawa's offensive line is shaky this year. They've lost so many pieces of it. Saskatchewan's defense put up 6 sacks against them in week number 3. Granted, that Riders defensive line is looking very, very good. So maybe that's, more of a credit to them than a knock on Ottawa. But, Ottawa hasn't gotten anything going offensively. They've struggled to put points on the board. So I think BC has the potential to get some defensive fantasy points in that regard from just Ottawa not scoring enough and, get some of those sacks. But the cautionary tale with BC's defense is I don't think they're going to get a ton of turnovers necessarily this week. Nichols, give him that game manager label. He doesn't put up a ton of yards, but those don't matter for defensive fantasy points. He right now isn't putting up a ton of points, and as a whole, the Ottawa offense isn't. That will go in BC's favor, but Nichols doesn't turn over the ball very much. And so if you're not getting the turnover points, you're not getting necessarily a huge day out of BC's defense. Look at the 3 games they've played so far. 5 points against Saskatchewan, didn't get a ton of turnovers there. 2 points against Edmonton, no turnovers there. 15 points against Calgary due to 4 interceptions of Bo Levi Mitchell. So BC's totals this year have been carried by their turnovers, I think. I think, the defensive line has not piled up a ton of sacks, so maybe they don't pile up quite as many as Saskatchewan did against Ottawa. So I think there's the potential there for BC to put up some points, but I don't think it's going to be a barn burner of a defensive performance necessarily from them. And it's kind of the same tale with Ottawa. Week 1 they put up 19 points against Edmonton. Week 3 they put up 0 against the Riders. No sacks, no turnovers, no nothing for the Ottawa defense in week 3. So the question becomes, which one are we going to see in week number 4 against the Lions? I expect somewhere, kind of in the middle. I don't think that performance they put up in week 1 against Edmonton is sustainable. That was a spectacular performance when they were out on the field most of the game. The offense didn't help them out whatsoever, and they came up with a couple huge plays, got the big touchdown, which helped to lead to those stats there. I also don't think BC's offense is quite as efficient as the Riders is. So I think we'll see Ottawa's defense somewhere more in the middle range of that. Maybe they can get to I see maybe like a 6 to 10 point range for Ottawa, a couple sacks. I don't know if they'll get, based on points allowed. I could see BC putting up a decent number of points with a high-powered offense, but they're missing a couple pieces on the offensive line. Their offensive line, I don't think, is one of the most solid in the league necessarily right now either. So I think there's some sacks Ottawa could put up, maybe a couple of turnovers. I don't think BC's necessarily the best team when it comes to holding onto the ball. But I don't expect it to be a huge breakout day like we saw in week number 1 from Ottawa's defense. And finally, the 2 teams I'm staying away from defensively. The first one's the Calgary Stampeders, $3,938. In 3 games so far this year, they've put up 5 points, 5 points, and 4 points. So not really warranting putting in your lineup. That's not production that's going to help put you over the top in CFL Fantasy. They also face a Bombers offense that has, in my opinion, the best offensive line in the CFL. So they're not going to give up a whole lot of sacks unless you're facing a really premium pass rush, which I just don't think Calgary has with their current lineup. Zach Collaros also doesn't turn over the ball very much. I believe only 2 interceptions through 3 games so far. So you're not going to get a ton of turnover points. You're not going to get the points from the sacks. And you're likely not going to get the points from points allowed against the Bombers either. They've put up a decent point total in all 3 games so far. Even last week when the offense struggled against Toronto, they still put up a couple of touchdowns. So I say stay away from Calgary's defense. I don't think this is a matchup that favors them when it comes to fantasy points. And the same thing for Hamilton facing Montreal. $3,264 for the Ticats. They have the lowest average points in the league so far out of defenses. 3.5 fantasy points a game, 4 against Winnipeg, 3 against Saskatchewan. The Ticats first of all, their defense is in those two games had to spend a lot of time out on the field, got tired as the game went along, and teams ran the ball down their throats because the offense just didn't get things going. So maybe it tips back a little more favorably for the Ticats defense if the offense gets on board this week. But if not, these are the point totals you're going to get. And you look at the quarterbacks they face. Collaros was very mobile in week 1. Cody Fajardo is always a very mobile quarterback. I would say Vernon Adams Jr. is the most mobile in the league. He put up 65 rushing yards last week against Calgary, and I could see him doing the same against Hamilton. He's going to be hard to tackle, hard to sack. Montreal's offensive line, I think, has been very good so far this year. Defenses against Montreal have put up 0 points and 4 points. So it seems to be, not a favorable matchup and not a team that has put up the points that would warrant me putting them in my lineup thinking they could overcome a bad matchup. So I stay away from Calgary's and Hamilton's defenses in week 4. I potentially like the BC Ottawa options. And to me, the two clear options for this week are Winnipeg and Montreal's defenses. That does it for the defensive preview for week 4. Make sure you go back, check out the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. Those are all up on the YouTube channel now already, going through the best and worst options at those positions. And stay tuned tomorrow as well. On Friday, I will have a depth chart and injury report update based on all of the news we have up until this point in the week to help get you ready to finalize and start setting in your lineups for week number 4 of CFL Fantasy. Do all of the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't. If you have any fantasy questions, put them in the comments section. Tweet them at me at CooperTrooper42. I'm always happy to answer those or provide any insight I might be able to. So stay tuned for further updates and get ready to start setting in your lineups for week number 4 of CFL Fantasy. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.